Most of us don't think about life and death every day. At least, if we're lucky, we don't. Sure, death is inevitable, and eventually we all have to face it. But medical workers like nurses, EMTs, doctors, and psych techs look death in the face every single day. They are the tightrope walkers tiptoeing between the living world and whatever comes next, fighting, sometimes literally, with the pull of death's grip. Truth be told, the stories I'm about to tell you leave me feeling uneasy. There are unsettling threads of familiarity woven through them. How do countless strangers share such eerily similar encounters and experiences? It seems they're not alone in the borderlands between life and death. There are other things there, too. Welcome, fellow chill seekers, to Lady Grimm, where the veil between our world and the unknown grows thin. I am your guide through these chilling tales. Take a deep breath and get comfortable, for we're about to descend into the abyss. Welcome to Lady Grimm, where the paranormal comes alive. I work as a psychiatric technician at an old hospital that was built at the turn of the century. It's a sprawling campus that served numerous purposes. Originally, it was a tuberculosis hospital, but now it's a full-spectrum medical facility divided into components for different levels of care. I work in the hospital's adult residential treatment facility. My patients need long-term psychiatric care, and most of them have spent the majority of their lives institutionalized. There was a patient, Agnes, a woman in her 70s who was catatonic, meaning she did not speak or move, holding her face in a blank, fixed stare. In the years that I knew her, I had never once heard her voice. I was assigned to care for her once weekly as she required one-to-one assistance for all her daily activities. She'd sit perfectly still, always in silence, even when other residents became agitated or even violent. I always wondered what was going on behind her stare, but nobody knew for sure. I'd often sing to her as I arranged her room or fed her. I'm a chatty person, and her silence never stopped me from talking to her, knowing full well she wouldn't utter a single word in response. Agnes developed heart disease. The visits to the cardiac unit became more frequent, and the number of pills in her daily med cocktail doubled. As her breathing became more labored, we knew her condition was worsening. One night, as I was making my last rounds of the evening, I checked on Agnes. I would arrange her pillows snugly against her side so she'd stay comfortable until I'd change her later in the night. I found myself short a pillow and turned to reach into her closet for another. Just then, I heard a raspy woman's voice behind me. "He's come for me!" I turned to see Agnes sitting straight up in bed, staring at a corner of the ceiling. In all the years of caring for this woman, she never uttered a word. That was the first and last time I ever heard her voice. She passed away that night. At the psychiatric hospital where I work, there's a teen building. It's an intense, active unit, a shocking contrast from the long-term adult unit where I normally work nights. One night, that unit found itself understaffed, and as the junior member of the nursing team on my unit, they pulled me to help out. As I scanned my keycard at the door, I tucked it into my shirt. You weren't supposed to keep it around your neck for safety reasons at this unit, but I didn't have pockets, and I didn't want to hold it all night. When I tell you the unit is far more intense, it's because it's a crisis unit where fresh intakes start their hospitalizations. Sometimes the kids are detoxing from drugs, or many are at risk for self-harm. Violence is a daily problem, so this unit could never run understaffed. We do hourly rounds, which are physical hourly checks, to be sure each patient is alive and where they're supposed to be. Before lights out, we include a quick check of each bedroom too. We have to be sure our kids aren't hiding something they shouldn't have, like broken glass, rope, or other contraband. The kids wait in the common living area until the staff person doing the room checks gives the all clear to go to bed. Since I didn't know the kids that well, I volunteered. I started at the far end of the first of 3 dead-end halls that extended out from the central living area. I entered the first room and looked in all the usual places. In the closet, under the bed, in the small bathroom. As I completed my sweep, I turned to leave the room and saw something dark move in the small, Spartan bathroom I had just left. I looked up in time to see the dark reflection in the dull metal mirror that faced the open bathroom door. I felt my heart racing as I considered my options. I didn't know the staff too well in this unit, and telling them I was scared to do room checks felt ridiculous. On the other hand, I knew that bathroom was empty because I had just been inside it. There was barely enough space to turn around in it, much less hide. I went back to the bathroom and turned on the light. It flickered, and I could hear the buzz of the light as it illuminated the small space. It was empty, and I turned to leave, turning off the light. As I stepped forward out of the bathroom, I felt a sharp pain at the front of my neck. My keycard lanyard that I'd tucked into my shirt had been yanked backwards and was now hanging down my back outside my shirt. I got out of that room as fast as I could and heard the door close behind me. I took a minute to catch my breath in the hallway. I could hear the kids in the living area talking, but there was nobody down this hall with me. Later that night, as we logged patient notes, I told the charge nurse what had happened. Calmly and casually, she said, "Strange things like that happened all the time, and that's why staff on this unit don't wear their lanyards around their necks like the rest of the hospital." She explained that not every kid could be saved, and despite their efforts, things happened. Everyone assumed they were former patients because they liked to target new staff, but nobody really knew for sure. I avoid that unit whenever possible. I'm a nurse at a memory care facility in a suburban area. It's a nice facility with a high standard of care and deep pockets. I was hired for the overnight shift, and the pay was excellent. At every shift, we're required to write patient notes. We generally do this in the central office area late into the shift. We had a clear view of the hallways from there, but we had to keep our voices low, as many of the residents slept with their doors open. One night, just before 3 a.m., one of the residents used the call bell to bring us to her room. I walked down the empty hall to check on her and pushed on her closed door. She was a light sleeper, so her door was always shut at night. In the dim light coming from the hallway, I could see her propped up on her elbow, rubbing her eyes. When I asked her what was wrong, she told me she didn't want to be disturbed again. Confused, I questioned her. She said the other nurses have been standing by her bed and won't leave. I was perplexed. There were only 4 of us on staff that night, and we had all been writing our shift notes together down the hall. Concerned that someone may have broken into the facility, I asked her what they looked like. She described 3 male nurses wearing black clothes and hats. She had awakened to find them standing at the foot of her bed, but they wouldn't say anything and wouldn't leave. As her voice trailed off, her bathroom door creaked open, and we looked towards the bathroom and the darkness inside the now open door. "See? They won't leave." I felt the goosebumps crawling on my arms as I walked to the bathroom door and flicked on the light. As far as I could see, it was empty. I closed the door and settled my resident back into bed while keeping my back away from the bathroom door. I told the other nurses what happened, and along with security, we did a quiet check of the facility to be sure someone hadn't snuck in. We found nothing. Security checked the cameras in that hallway and confirmed nobody had entered her room after bedtime, except for us. This repeated for the next 4 nights, with the woman becoming increasingly more agitated each night, insisting that the nurses were there each night when she would wake. This repeated for the next 4 nights, with the woman becoming increasingly more agitated every night. On the 5th morning, the day staff discovered the resident had passed away in her sleep. Since then, other residents have complained about the nurses in black, and when they do, we know what's coming. They pass away soon after those nightly visitations start. I carry my rosary in the pocket of my scrubs now, and I don't go straight home after work. I always stop at the 7-Eleven near the facility and grab a soda even if I'm not thirsty. Before I go inside, I hold my rosary tight and whisper to anyone that might be hitching a ride with me that this is the end of the line and they need to leave. I take an extra minute with the door open before going into the store. I don't want anything to follow me home. I'm an ER nurse and have seen wild things, but nothing compares to the time I saw something I still can't explain. A young woman came in coding. She had been stabbed over 20 times and was losing her fight. We were in full crisis mode, everyone attending to this young life, giving immediate IV drugs and trying to stop the bleeding that was soaking the gurney. Her color was already draining from her face, and I remember hearing her mother screaming outside the swinging ER doors. I didn't want to be the one to tell her what I already knew. My back was turned to the young woman as I reached for supplies on the far side of the room. When I turned back towards her, the room felt like it was tunneling into slow motion, and I could see my coworkers bent over her dying body. About 3 feet behind the gurney past her head, I saw something that I could only describe as black static in human form. It came through the wall. It moved fast. The whole incident lasted less than a second. I had the feeling it was there for her. I watched it pulse and flicker, and then it just disappeared into the floor behind her gurney. I was the only one who saw it, and I feel like I wasn't supposed to. The woman was pronounced dead minutes later. Thanks for being here with me and listening to these stories. If you're enjoying them, please subscribe, leave a comment, and let me know you're out there. I appreciate it. Now, let me tell you another story. I work overnights at a small rural hospital. It's generally pretty quiet on my floor, but we do care for many patients who we know are terminal. Over the years that I've worked there, I have come to know Lucy. At least, that's what we call her. We don't know what she is or why she's there, but she seems to know when a patient is living their last days or hours. Generally, it goes like this. A patient will press the call button late at night, and when we check on them, they'll ask us to keep the little girl out of their room because she won't let them sleep. We've heard that she turns the bathroom lights on, pulls on bed sheets, and even raises and lowers beds as patients sleep. At that point, I tell my patient that I'll put a stop to it and get them settled back again. As I leave the room and walk down the hallway, I tell Lucy to stop and let my patient rest. Most of the time, this is enough to stop her, but if she continues, it usually means the patient is going to pass in the next day or so. We never tell patients what her visits mean. We've never seen Lucy, which is good considering what she seems to predict, but I came close 3 weeks ago. A young man in his 20s with severe kidney issues was with us and, like the others, used the call alarm just before 2 a.m. When I went to check on him, he said a girl who'd looked like his little sister kept entering his room and running back and forth, giggling. I told him I'd stop the disruptions and turned off his light. As I walked towards the door, I asked him what she looked like. He said she was about 8 years old with long dark hair and that she was wearing a yellow dress. I don't know if she looks the same to everyone, but he died 2 days later. The hospital where I work is older, and we see and hear crazy things. Things I never would have believed possible before becoming a nurse. After patients pass, we have a tradition of always opening a window. I used to laugh when the older nurses would open the window, and they'd tell me I'd learn to do it too. They warned me not to forget to open a window after a patient died. One night, one of my monitors alarmed, and despite our attempts at saving the patient, he passed soon after. In the rush of activity, I forgot to open the window. For the rest of that shift, weird things happened. While I was checking my orders at the central desk, the elevators directly in front of the desk opened and stayed open with nobody inside. While I was alone at the desk, I got 2 calls on my cell, back to back, from that desk's phone line. I was holding my ringing phone while looking at the nurse's station phone that nobody was using. When I went to the computer, the monitor turned off. As I sat at the desk, I started feeling like someone was pranking me. As I was checking the connection at the back of the monitor, I heard the charge nurse, Raquel, slide her chair over to mine, and without skipping a beat, she asked me if I had opened a window after the patient passed earlier that night. In a loud voice, she told them to cut it out, that I was new and would open the window from now on. I went back to that room and opened the window. The rest of the night was quiet. Now, I make sure to open the window each time someone passes, just in case. An elderly gentleman was on my floor, and during one of my overnight rounds with him, he asked me why Annie was here without his daughter. The man's daughter had been there during the day, but must have gone home for the night. The other bed was vacant, and there was nobody in the room with him. It took me a minute to realize who he was referring to because he was so worried about her. I discovered that Annie was his granddaughter's name. As he spoke, he kept glancing at the chair against the far wall of the room. To ease his worries, I asked him if he had a picture of his granddaughter to share with me, and he pointed to his wallet by the bed. I handed it to him, and he pulled out a dog-eared photo of a 6 or 7-year-old girl with wavy red hair pulled back into a messy ponytail. She had a wide smile, and she was holding a rabbit. Her clothes were from the 1970s, and the state of the picture gave away its age. I gave him back her picture and got him settled back in for the night. I reassured him I would find her mother if he would try and rest. As I left the room, he said, "Hold her hand, sweetie, so you don't get lost again. There, good girl." I couldn't control the goosebumps that climbed up my arm as I left his room. I was just finishing my shift when I saw the man's daughter arrived for her visit the following morning. I waved her over to me and asked if Annie was with her, as her father had been talking about her. The woman's face drained of color, and she started crying. Her daughter, Annie, had gone missing and had never been found. When I returned from my next shift, I was told my patient had died that morning. In my field of nursing, I'm often one of the last faces patients see before they pass. But they see other faces too, ones we can't see. It's not uncommon for people to see a spouse or mothers or fathers that have been long dead. As I care for them, patients will carry on whole conversations with people I can't see. They talk to them as though they're standing right beside me. I don't know how it works, if they're seeing them because they're thinking about the end of their lives and of those loved ones who may be waiting on the other side, or maybe seeing familiar faces is a part of the welcoming process to ease the transition from life to death. I really don't know. Probably the sweetest of these experiences that I can remember was from an elderly woman that was nearing the end of a long illness and had very few lucid moments. I was checking on her very early one morning. It was just as the sun was coming up and the room had a glow to it. As I checked her vitals, she sat up as best as she could and looked straight at me. It was the most lucid I had ever seen her. She asked me if I liked her curls, reaching up towards her short white hair, now entirely devoid of any style or curl. She said she'd saved up to get her hair done. She wanted to look like $1 million for when he came home. She smiled towards the window as the sun came up, telling me how handsome he looked in his uniform. She squeezed my hand and closed her eyes, falling into a deep sleep. Checking her record, I found there was no next of kin. I don't know if her uniformed soldier had ever made it back from some distant land, but he was there with her that morning. When she passed a few days later, I hope she was with her handsome soldier again. I cared for a young woman who was moved from post-op recovery to my unit due to overflow. She stayed with us for 3 nights. Her husband and young son would visit her every day. She shared a room with an older lady who was also recovering from her surgery. The older lady had been a quiet patient and had asked for nothing from the nurses while she was there. I was taking the young mother's vitals as the older woman was being discharged and wheeled away. As she passed the family, she made a curious remark to them. She said she was glad whenever the family visited, because the man in black would leave soon after they arrived. The family never saw a man in the room. In my 21 years of nursing, I've seen the man in black twice. I don't know who or what he is. The first time I saw him, I was checking on a patient at rounds and opened the door to see him standing over my patient, just watching. I had been opening the door with my hands full, not fully committed to looking up. When he caught my attention and I snapped back up to look, I was alone with my patient. From that half-second glance, the man was wearing a black suit and a hat, maybe a fedora. I don't remember seeing a face, but the glance was so quick. I thought I had imagined it at first, but when my patient stirred, they asked who the man in the room had been. The patient died that same week. The second time I saw him, it was a quiet night after visiting hours. I saw a shadow standing behind a patient who was walking towards me in the hall. As my eyes adjusted, I saw the shadow move out of view behind the patient, then disappear. I did a double take, but my patient didn't seem to be aware of the man, so I ruled out that they were walking together. This patient went on to recover fully and was discharged. I've heard other people, nurses and non-nurses, describe a man in black when death is close. I don't know if that's who or what I saw on those two occasions, but I never want to see that man in black again.